I will never forget the moment I found the envelope. It was tucked under the windshield wiper of my car when I came out of work that Tuesday evening. No name, no address, just a plain manila envelope sealed with red wax, like something from another century. My hands shook as I broke the seal and pulled out a single photograph. It was a picture of my grandfather Edwin at his estate, taken from a distance through the iron gates. Someone had drawn a red X over his face. On the back, scrawled in angry capital letters, were 4 words that made my stomach drop. "You will get nothing." I stood there in the parking garage, the concrete walls seeming to close in around me, and I knew with absolute certainty that my grandfather was in danger. That I was in danger. That the family I had been trying so hard to believe in had finally shown me exactly who they were. The envelope slipped from my fingers and fluttered to the ground as my phone rang. It was Attorney Robert Davies, and his voice was heavy with the kind of sorrow that changes everything. "Alex, I am so sorry. Edwin passed away this morning. I need you to come to my office immediately. There are things you need to know, things he wanted you to have." The parking garage spun around me and I had to lean against my car to stay upright. He was gone. My grandfather, the only person who had ever truly seen me, was gone. And someone had known it was coming. Someone had wanted to make sure I knew that even in death, they would not let me have what was mine. Before we go any further, if you are enjoying this story of justice and redemption, please hit that like button, subscribe to hear more stories like this, and drop a comment below telling me what you would do in this situation. Your support means everything. Now, let me take you back to where this all truly started. I need to go back further than I initially thought. Back to when I was 16 years old and my mother, Catherine, died in a car accident. Catherine was not Edwin Vance's biological daughter. She was the daughter of his second wife, Margaret, from her first marriage. Edwin had married Margaret when I was 8 years old, and he had embraced both my mother and me as his family without hesitation. He never treated us as anything less than blood. He walked my mother down the aisle at her wedding. He was there when I was born, cutting the cake at the hospital celebration. He insisted I call him grandfather, not step-grandfather. To him, family was a choice, not just biology. But to his biological daughter Eleanor, we were always outsiders. I remember the first Christmas after Edwin married Margaret. I was 9 years old, excited to be part of a big family for the first time. My father had left when I was 3, so it had always been just my mom and me. Now suddenly I had a grandfather, a step-grandmother, an aunt, an uncle, and a cousin. Eleanor had shown up at the estate with her husband Charles and their 7-year-old son Brandon. She had taken one look at my mother and me sitting near the Christmas tree, and her smile had frozen. I did not understand it then, but my mother did. That evening, I overheard her talking quietly with Margaret in the kitchen. "She is never going to accept us," Mom had said, her voice tired. "Did you see the way Eleanor looked at Alex? Like she was calculating how much of Edwin's attention was being stolen from Brandon." Margaret had sighed deeply. Eleanor has always been possessive of her father's affection. Give her time. She will come around. But she never did. When my mother died 8 years later, I was lost. Utterly, completely lost. My father had never been in the picture, and suddenly my entire world was gone. Edwin had insisted I move into one of the guest houses on his estate. "You are not going through this alone, Alex. You are family. You belong here." I was too numb with grief to argue. For the first few months, I barely left the guest house. I attended school mechanically, came home, and sat in the dark. It was Edwin who pulled me out of that darkness. He would show up every evening with dinner from various restaurants around the city, trying to tempt my appetite with everything from Italian to Thai to classic American comfort food. He never pushed me to talk, but he was always there. Sometimes we would sit in silence for hours, him reading his newspaper while I stared at nothing. Other times, he would tell me stories about his own life, about loss and survival, and finding reasons to keep going. "Your mother loved you more than anything in this world, Alex. The best way to honor her is to live. Really live. Not just survive, but thrive. That is what she would want for you." Slowly, painfully, I began to heal. Edwin paid for therapy. He made sure I had everything I needed for school. He attended every single one of my high school events, even the minor ones. When I expressed interest in marketing and business, he arranged for me to intern at one of his smaller companies during the summer. But there was always tension simmering beneath the surface. Eleanor would visit the estate occasionally, always with a critical eye toward me. She never said anything overtly cruel when Edwin was around, but her comments had a way of landing like small cuts. "How are your grades, Alex? I hope you are taking full advantage of the opportunities my father is providing. It must be nice to have someone taking care of everything for you." Brandon, meanwhile, was away at a prestigious boarding school, coming home only for holidays. When he was around, he largely ignored me, which I preferred to active hostility. Margaret passed away from cancer when I was 18, just as I was preparing to leave for college. It was another devastating loss, and I saw how it aged Edwin overnight. He had truly loved her. At the funeral, Eleanor had immediately stepped into what she clearly saw as her rightful place as the woman of the family. She began making decisions about the estate, about Edwin's schedule, about everything. I was too wrapped up in my own grief and the chaos of starting college to notice how much control she was gradually assuming. College was my escape. I threw myself into my studies, made friends who knew nothing about my complicated family situation, and only came home for major holidays. Edwin and I stayed in touch through weekly phone calls and occasional lunches when I was in town, but I was building my own life, separate from the Vance family drama. I did not realize how much I was missing. I did not see the slow, methodical way Eleanor was isolating Edwin from anyone who might challenge her influence. It was not until I graduated and moved back to the city for my new job that I started to see the full picture. I had found an apartment I could afford on my starting salary, proud to be independent. Edwin had offered to help with rent, but I had declined. I wanted to prove I could make it on my own, that I was not just living off his generosity. I think that decision, more than anything else, earned his respect, but it also created a problem I had not anticipated. Without a financial tie, Eleanor could more easily paint me as distant, as someone who had moved on from the family. That Thanksgiving 3 years ago, when I was 21, was the first time I realized how bad things had gotten. I arrived at the estate excited to see Edwin, whom I had not seen in person for almost 2 months. But from the moment I walked in, something felt off. The housekeeper, Maria, who had always been warm and welcoming, seemed nervous when she greeted me. "Mr. Vance is in the sitting room with the family, Miss Alex. They have been here since yesterday." Yesterday? Eleanor and her family had come a day early and had not told me? When I entered the sitting room, I found Eleanor holding court. She was sitting in Margaret's favorite chair, which she had reupholstered in a fabric that Margaret would have hated. Charles was reading a newspaper, occasionally nodding along to whatever Eleanor was saying. Brandon was on his phone, barely looking up when I entered. Carol and Greg, Eleanor's younger siblings, whom I had only met a handful of times, were there too, which was unusual. They typically only showed up when they needed something. Edwin was sitting slightly apart from the group, and when he saw me, his whole face lit up. "Alex, there is my girl!" He stood up with some difficulty. I noticed he was moving slower than I remembered, and pulled me into a tight hug. "I have missed you. How is the new job?" Before I could answer, Eleanor cut in, her voice sweet but with an edge. "Dad, remember what the doctor said about not overexerting yourself. You should sit down." Edwin waved her off with mild annoyance. "I am hugging my granddaughter, Eleanor, not running a marathon." But he did sit down, and I noticed him wince slightly as he did. "Are you okay, grandfather?" I asked, concern flooding through me. "I am fine, just old bones complaining." He smiled, but I saw something flicker in his eyes, something he was not saying. Eleanor was watching our exchange with an unreadable expression. "Dad has been having some health issues. Nothing serious, but we have been making sure he takes it easy." "We?" It was the first time I had heard her use that possessive plural when talking about Edwin's care. I opened my mouth to ask more questions, but Brandon finally looked up from his phone. "So, Alex, still working that little marketing job? Must be tough making ends meet in this city on an entry-level salary." The condescension in his voice was unmistakable, but I kept my tone even. "I am doing fine, actually. I enjoy the work, and I am learning a lot." Carol, a thin woman with Eleanor's sharp features but none of her polish, laughed a bit too loudly. "Oh, to be young and idealistic again. Wait until the real bills start coming in," Greg grunted in agreement. "Some people have to work for a living. Some people get everything handed to them." The implication was clear, even though they were looking at me. They were suggesting I was the one who had been handed everything, which was rich coming from people who seemed to show up only when they needed money. The rest of that evening was excruciating. Every time I tried to have a conversation with Edwin, someone would interrupt. Eleanor constantly jumped in to answer questions directed at him, as if he could not speak for himself. She monitored what he ate, what he drank, when he took his medications. When I offered to help with preparations for dinner, Eleanor gave me that dismissive wave. "We have everything under control, Alex. You just relax. You are a guest here. A guest." In what had been my home during the darkest time of my life, dinner was even worse. The seating arrangement placed Eleanor at one end of the long table and Edwin at the other, with me stuck in the middle between Carol and Greg. Brandon sat directly across from me, and he spent the entire meal making subtle jabs. "So Alex, still living in that tiny apartment downtown? Must be quite a change from living on the estate. I heard those neighborhoods can be pretty rough." I smiled tightly. "It is a nice building, in a good area. I like having my own space." Eleanor chimed in from down the table. "Of course, it is important for young people to be independent, though I do worry about you, Alex. A young woman living alone in the city. If you ever need help, you should not be too proud to ask." Again, the implication that I was barely scraping by, that I was one crisis away from needing to beg for assistance. But it was what I overheard later that night that truly opened my eyes. I had gone to the kitchen to get a glass of water, unable to sleep in the guest room I used to consider my sanctuary. The house was dark and quiet, or so I thought. As I approached the kitchen, I heard voices coming from Eleanor's private study, a room she had claimed shortly after Margaret died. The door was slightly ajar, and I recognized Eleanor's voice, pitched low but intense. "I am telling you, we need to move faster. Dad is getting older and more stubborn. If he decides to do something crazy with the will, we need to be in a position to challenge it." That was Greg's voice responding. "What about the girl? Where does she fit in?" Eleanor's laugh was cold. "Alex, please, she is not even blood. She has no legal claim to anything. The most Dad might leave her is a small trust fund out of sentimentality, and even that we can contest if necessary. Charles, if we have proper documentation of his declining mental state." Charles spoke up, and his voice sounded strained. "Eleanor, I do not think that is fair. Edwin seems perfectly sharp to me. We cannot just manufacture evidence of incompetence." "Then maybe you need to decide whose side you are on." Eleanor's voice turned sharp. "This is about protecting our family, Brandon's future, your future. Or do you want to work for the rest of your life while Edwin gives away your inheritance to outsiders?" There was a long pause before Charles responded quietly. "I just think we should be careful." "That is all I am saying." Brandon's voice joined the conversation. "Mom is right, Dad. We have to be smart about this. I have been looking into the legal aspects for one of my classes. If we can show that Grandpa was unduly influenced or not of sound mind when making certain decisions, we have grounds to challenge. Plus, I have been talking to his banker. There are some transactions we should look into." My heart was pounding so hard I was afraid they would hear it. I stood frozen in the hallway, my water glass clutched in shaking hands. They were planning to declare Edwin incompetent. They were planning to steal his autonomy, his agency, his right to make his own decisions. And they were treating me like an enemy, an outsider trying to take what belonged to them. I carefully backed away from the door and returned to my room. I did not sleep at all that night. By morning, I had made a decision. I needed to talk to Edwin privately, to warn him about what I had heard. But getting him alone proved impossible. Eleanor orchestrated the entire day, from breakfast through lunch and into the afternoon activities. Every time I tried to pull Edwin aside, someone would interrupt or Eleanor would suggest that he needed to rest. By the time I left that evening, I had managed only a few minutes alone with him at the door. "Grandfather, I need to talk to you about something important. Can I come by this week? Just the two of us?" He studied my face carefully, and I saw understanding dawn in his eyes. "Of course, Alex. Come by Wednesday afternoon. I will make sure we have time to talk properly." True to his word, when I arrived on Wednesday, Edwin was alone in his study. Maria had answered the door and told me that Mrs. Eleanor had gone out for the day, though she had left strict instructions about when she would return. Edwin gestured for me to close the door behind me. "Sit down, Alex. You look troubled on Thanksgiving. What is on your mind?" I took a deep breath and told him everything I had overheard. As I spoke, his expression grew darker, but he did not seem surprised. He was quiet for a long moment after I finished, staring into the fireplace. "I know." His voice was heavy with sadness. "I have known for a while what Eleanor is planning. I have overheard conversations. I have seen documents she thought she hid. I have watched her slowly try to control every aspect of my life." The shock must have shown on my face because he gave me a sad smile. "You think because I am old that I am blind? I have been in business for 50 years, Alex. I know how to read people." I know when someone is trying to manipulate me. But grandfather, if you know, why haven't you stopped her? Why do you let her treat you like you cannot make your own decisions? He leaned back in his chair, looking suddenly exhausted. Because she is my daughter. Because I kept hoping she would see reason, that the Eleanor I raised, the little girl who used to sit on my lap and read stories with me, was still in there somewhere. But I am done hoping. I am done pretending I do not see what is happening. He pulled open a drawer in his desk and withdrew a business card. This is my attorney, Robert Davies. I have worked with him for 30 years, and I trust him completely. I have already made arrangements, Alex. Significant arrangements. But I need you to be prepared for what is coming. Because when I am gone, all hell is going to break loose. My throat tightened with fear and grief. Please do not talk about dying. You are healthy. You are strong. He shook his head gently. I am 78 years old. I have had a good life, a full life. But I am also a realist. And I want to make sure that when I am gone, the people who deserve to be taken care of are taken care of, and the people who have betrayed my trust face consequences. He reached into another drawer and pulled out a thick envelope. In this envelope are instructions. If anything happens to me, if I get sick or if I die unexpectedly, I want you to take this directly to Davies. Do not open it. Do not tell anyone you have it. Do not even keep it at your apartment where someone could find it. Do you have somewhere safe you can store it? I thought of my best friend Maya, whom I had known since college and trusted implicitly. I can give it to my friend for safekeeping. Good. He handed me the envelope, and his grip on my hand was firm. Alex, I need you to understand something. What I am doing is not about punishing Eleanor, though she deserves it. It is about justice. It is about making sure that someone with integrity and character controls what I have built. You never asked me for anything. You never hung around hoping for a handout. You built your own life. That is worth more than any amount of money. I felt tears burning in my eyes. I love you, grandfather. Not because of money or estates or any of that. I love you because you are kind and generous and you have always made me feel like I mattered. His own eyes were damp. And I love you, my dear girl. More than you know. Now, promise me something. Promise me that no matter what happens, no matter what they say or do, you will stand firm. You will not let them bully you into giving up what is rightfully yours. Promise me you will fight. I promised, even though I had no idea what I was really promising to fight for. I took the envelope home, gave it to Maya with minimal explanation, just asked her to keep it safe and not to give it to anyone but me or Attorney Davies if something happened to me. She agreed without prying. Bless her. Over the next several months, I visited Edwin as often as I could, but it became increasingly difficult. Eleanor had essentially moved into the estate, claiming that Edwin needed full-time family support. She hired a team of nurses and caregivers, all of whom reported to her. She installed new locks and a security system. When I would show up for planned visits, I was often told that Edwin was resting or not feeling well. The few times I did get in to see him, someone was always hovering nearby, monitoring our conversation. Edwin and I developed a sort of code. We would talk about books, about current events, about nothing in particular, but his eyes would tell me what his words could not. He was trapped. He was being managed. And he was waiting for the right moment to spring his trap. Then came the stroke. I got a call at work from an unknown number. Is this Alex? This is Nurse Patterson. I am calling from City General Hospital. Your grandfather, Edwin Vance, was brought in this morning with a suspected stroke. The family has been notified, but I saw your name on his emergency contact list, and I thought you should know. The family has been asking that only immediate family be allowed to visit. My stomach dropped. Is he okay? What is his condition? He is stable, but we are running tests. I cannot say more than that. But Miss Alex, he was asking for you when he first came in. He specifically said to make sure you knew. Before I could respond, I heard Eleanor's voice in the background. Nurse Patterson, I need you off the phone. This is a family matter. The line went dead. I left work immediately and drove to the hospital. When I arrived at the ICU waiting area, Eleanor was there with Charles, Brandon, Carol, and Greg. They looked up when I entered, and Eleanor's expression hardened. Alex. What are you doing here? Visiting my grandfather. Where is he? Can I see him? Eleanor stood up, blocking my path. The doctors have said he needs complete rest. No visitors except immediate family until his condition stabilizes. I felt my temper flare. I am immediate family. Eleanor's smile was razor thin. Are you, though? You are not a blood relative. You are not even listed as next of kin. I have medical power of attorney, and I am making the decisions about who sees him and when. Right now, that does not include you. Brandon stepped up beside his mother, physically reinforcing the barrier they were creating. You heard her, Alex. Come back in a few days when he is feeling better. If the anger I felt was volcanic, the fear was worse. What if he never got better? What if this was my last chance to see him, and they were taking it from me? I tried to go around them, toward the nurse's station, but Greg moved to block me. Do not make a scene, the older man said in a low voice. You will just upset Edwin more. Security will remove you if you cause trouble. I wanted to scream, to fight, to demand my rights. But I was one person against 5, and they had legal documents on their side. Medical power of attorney meant Eleanor genuinely had the right to control who visited. I felt utterly helpless. I spent the rest of that day calling every number I could think of. I called Davies, but he told me his hands were tied legally unless Edwin was conscious and could request his presence. I called the hospital repeatedly, but they confirmed what Eleanor had said. She had the authority to limit visitors. I even considered calling the police, but what would I report? That my family would not let me visit someone in the hospital? It was not illegal, just cruel. For 2 weeks, I was kept away while Eleanor maintained her vigil. She even gave a tearful interview to a local news station about the heartbreak of watching her father suffer and the burden of making difficult medical decisions. She played the devoted daughter perfectly. When Edwin was finally released from the hospital, he did not go home to the estate. Eleanor had him transferred to a luxury rehabilitation facility that cost thousands of dollars per day. She claimed it was for his own good, that he needed round-the-clock specialized care. But I knew it was about control. She had him exactly where she wanted him, isolated and dependent. I tried to visit the facility, but my name was not on the approved visitor list. I tried calling, but I was told Mr. Vance was not taking calls at this time. It was like he had vanished. I felt like I was going crazy. How could they just erase him like this? How could they keep a grown man prisoner and call it care? I contacted Davies again, more desperate this time. There has to be something we can do. They have cut him off completely. Davies sounded frustrated. I have tried, Alex. I even went to the facility myself, but Eleanor has convinced the staff that Edwin is cognitively impaired and that any visitors might confuse or distress him. Unless we can prove she is acting against his wishes, there is not much legal recourse. The stroke has given her the perfect excuse to take complete control, prove his wishes. I thought about the envelope locked in Maya's safe. Not yet. I did not know what was in it, but I knew Edwin had given it to me for a reason. If I played that card too early, Eleanor might find a way to invalidate it or claim it was created under duress. I had to wait, as much as it killed me. 2 more months passed in agony. I threw myself into work during the day and spent my evenings researching elder abuse, medical rights, and estate law. I documented every attempt I made to contact Edwin, every conversation with Davies, everything. If this ever went to court, I wanted a paper trail. And then, on a Tuesday morning in March, my phone rang at 6 a.m. It was Charles. His voice was rough with emotion. Alex, I thought you should know. Edwin passed away last night. Peacefully, in his sleep. The funeral is Saturday. Eleanor is handling arrangements. I should have felt shock. I should have felt grief. And I did feel those things. But under it all was a cold, burning rage. They had stolen his last months from me. They had kept me from saying goodbye. They had isolated him, controlled him, and now they were going to bury him while playing the grieving family. I need to see him. I need to say goodbye before the funeral. Eleanor has his body at Franklin Funeral Home. Viewing is Thursday evening for family. I will make sure your name is on the list this time. Thank you. I could barely get the words out. Charles, can I ask you something? Did he say anything about me? Did he ask for me? Another long pause. Yes. He asked for you often, especially in the early days after the stroke. Eleanor kept telling him you were busy with work, that you would visit soon. He seemed to believe her, or maybe he was too weak to argue. I am sorry, Alex. I should have pushed back harder. I should have insisted you be allowed to visit. But Eleanor can be very convincing when she wants to be, and I thought I was protecting him from stress. The line went dead, and I sat there on my bed, phone still pressed to my ear, and finally let myself cry. Not just for Edwin's death, but for all the lost time, all the stolen goodbyes, all the manipulation and cruelty. The viewing on Thursday evening was surreal. The funeral home was elegant and expensive, filled with flowers and soft classical music. Edwin looked peaceful in his casket, dressed in his favorite navy suit. I stood there looking at him, and all I could think was that this was wrong. Everything about this was wrong. He should have died surrounded by people who loved him, not isolated in a facility managed by people who saw him as a meal ticket. I stood there for a long time, whispering my goodbyes, telling him I was sorry I could not protect him, promising him I would not let them win. When I finally turned to leave, I nearly ran into Eleanor. She was dressed in elegant black, diamond earrings glinting in the soft light. "Alex, I am glad you came. I know how much Dad meant to you." The false sympathy in her voice made me want to scream. "You kept me from him. You took away my chance to say goodbye." Her expression did not change. "I did what was medically necessary. Dad was fragile. The doctors said limiting visitors would help his recovery. We all hoped he would improve." I stepped closer to her, keeping my voice low so the other people in the room would not hear. "You did not do this for his health. You did this to control him. You isolated him so you could manage his assets and make sure no one questioned what you were doing." Her eyes flashed with something dangerous. "Be very careful what you accuse me of, Alex. You are grieving and not thinking clearly. Let us not say things we will regret." I smiled, and I knew it did not reach my eyes. "Oh, I am thinking very clearly, and I have not even started saying the things you are going to regret." I walked away before she could respond, my heart pounding but my resolve hardening. The funeral on Saturday was a production. Eleanor had invited what seemed like half the city. Business associates, society friends, politicians, everyone who might be impressed by the spectacle. The cathedral was filled with white roses, hundreds of them. The choir sang classical hymns. The eulogies painted Edwin as a philanthropist, a business titan, a beloved father and grandfather. Eleanor spoke, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, talking about the precious time she had spent caring for him in his final months. My final gift to him was ensuring he was comfortable and surrounded by family love. I sat in the back, listening to her rewrite history, and I wondered if I was the only one who saw through it. But then Charles caught my eye from where he sat in the family section. He looked uncomfortable, guilty even. Maybe he saw it too. After the service, there was a reception at the estate. I almost did not go. I did not want to walk through that house, seeing all the changes Eleanor had made, feeling Edwin's absence in every room, but something drew me there anyway. Maybe it was the need to face what I had lost. Maybe it was the need to remind them I was still here, still watching. The house was full of people I did not know, all of them offering condolences to Eleanor as if she was the only one who had lost something. I drifted through the rooms like a ghost, until I found myself in Edwin's study. The door was closed but unlocked, and I slipped inside, needing a moment of quiet. The room still smelled like his cologne and old books. His reading glasses were still on the desk. I sat in his chair and let the grief wash over me. That is when I noticed the corner of something sticking out from between two books on the shelf. I pulled it out carefully. It was a photograph of my mother and me from years ago, probably when I was about 15. We were laughing at something, arms around each other. On the back, in Edwin's handwriting, was a note. "Catherine and Alex, the family that chose me, just as I chose them. Blood does not make family. Love does." I clutched the photo to my chest and cried harder than I had since my mother died. He had known. He had understood what it meant to be chosen rather than simply being born into something. And he had made his choice clear. I carefully pocketed the photograph and left the study, only to nearly collide with Brandon in the hallway. He looked me up and down with barely concealed contempt, snooping around, looking for valuables to pocket. I met his gaze steadily. I was saying goodbye to my grandfather, in the only place he felt truly at peace. "What are you doing?" he smirked, "making sure nothing walks out of here that should not." "Mom is worried about family heirlooms disappearing. You understand. We need to protect Grandpa's legacy." The implication was clear and insulting. I could have argued, could have defended myself, but what was the point? In a few days, they would find out just how wrong they were about everything, so instead I just smiled. "You should be worried about protecting things. You really should." I walked away, leaving him looking confused and slightly unnerved. The next few days were quiet. I went to work, came home, waited, and then, exactly 1 week after Edwin's funeral, I received a call from Robert Davies. "Alex, I need you to come to my office tomorrow at 9 a.m. Can you bring the envelope Edwin gave you?" I felt my pulse spike. "Yes, I will be there." The time for waiting was over. The time for truth was beginning. That night I called Maya and retrieved the envelope. She handed it over with a worried expression. Is everything okay? I honestly do not know. But it is about to get very interesting. I spent that evening reading through all the notes I had made over the past months. All my documentation of being kept away from Edwin, all the strange financial movements I had noticed in the company news, all of it. I wanted to be prepared for whatever came next. And then, because I knew I would not sleep anyway, I looked up everything I could find about contesting wills, about elder abuse, about financial fraud and estate management. If Eleanor wanted a war, I was going to be armed with knowledge. The next morning, I dressed in my best professional suit, pulled my hair back into a neat bun, and drove to Davies and Associates. The office was impressive, all glass and steel and expensive artwork. The receptionist seemed to be expecting me. Miss Alex, Mr. Davies is waiting for you. Conference room B. Please follow me. Davies was standing by the window when I entered, looking out at the city skyline. When he turned to face me, I saw the same mix of sadness and determination that I felt. Thank you for coming, Alex. Do you have the envelope? I pulled it out of my bag and handed it to him. He nodded, placing it on the conference table next to several other folders. Sit down, please. We have a lot to discuss before tomorrow. Tomorrow? He took a seat across from me. The formal reading of Edwin's will is scheduled for tomorrow at 2 p.m. at the Vance estate. Everyone will be there. Eleanor, Charles, Brandon, Carol, Greg, and a few other interested parties. It is going to be very difficult, Alex. I need you to be prepared for that. Prepared for what? What is in the will? He opened one of the folders and slid it across to me. Your grandfather has named you as the sole beneficiary of his entire estate. Everything. The mansion, all business holdings, all investment portfolios, and a trust fund currently valued at approximately $37 million. Eleanor, Charles, Brandon, Carol, and Greg receive nothing except personal items of sentimental value only. The room spun for a moment. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. That cannot be right. Why would he do that? What about Eleanor? She is his daughter. Davies leaned forward, his expression grave. Because over the past 5 years, Eleanor has been systematically stealing from him. Along with Greg and Carol, she has forged documents, falsified loan applications, and embezzled nearly $4 million from various accounts. Brandon has been assisting them, using his law school knowledge to help cover their tracks. Edwin hired a private investigator 3 years ago, well before he made these changes to his will. Everything is documented: bank records, forged signatures, recorded phone calls, emails, witness testimonies from staff they thought they had intimidated into silence. It is all here. He gestured to the thick folders on the table. But there is more. Edwin established a separate trust fund for you 5 years ago, long before he changed his will. It is currently worth $1.3 million and has been independently managed. This proves that your financial security was already established, which will be crucial in defending against any claims that you manipulated him or that the will was changed under duress. He thought of everything. I felt tears starting to form. He really knew. He knew, and he had to live with it, knowing his own daughter was stealing from him. Davies nodded slowly. He was heartbroken. I met with him many times over those years, and he kept hoping Eleanor would stop, that she would show remorse, that the daughter he raised was still in there somewhere. But she only got bolder. The stroke was actually suspicious. The doctors could not find a clear cause. Edwin himself wondered if someone had tampered with his medication. The implication of what he was saying hit me like a physical blow. You think someone deliberately caused his stroke? I think Edwin thought it was possible. There was no proof, nothing that could be investigated without creating a scandal. But the timing was convenient for Eleanor. It gave her the perfect excuse to take full control and isolate him completely. He knew what was happening, and he was powerless to stop it in those final months. But he had made arrangements beforehand. Everything you need to defend his will and his wishes is in these folders. Everything you need to seek justice is here. I opened the folder with shaking hands and started to read. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank statements showing wire transfers to accounts in Eleanor's name. Forged loan documents with Edwin's signature that had been analyzed by handwriting experts and proven false. Recorded phone conversations where Eleanor, Greg, and Carol discussed how to access more of Edwin's money and how to keep me away so I would not notice. Email exchanges between Brandon and various financial institutions where he posed as Edwin's representative to authorize questionable transactions. Witness statements from housekeepers, nurses, groundskeepers, all people who had seen things and been threatened into silence. One nurse testified that Eleanor had asked her to give Edwin sedatives that were not prescribed, to keep him drowsy and compliant. A housekeeper reported seeing Eleanor in Edwin's study going through files and taking documents. The groundskeeper had overheard phone conversations about accelerating the timeline before anyone caught on. And then there was the video. Davies pulled out a laptop and opened a file. Your grandfather recorded this 6 months before his stroke. He wanted you to see it, wanted everyone to see it, if things went the way he feared they would. He pressed play, and suddenly Edwin was there on the screen, sitting in his study, looking directly into the camera. His eyes were clear and sharp, his voice strong. My name is Edwin Vance. Today is September 14th, and I am recording this statement to explain my decisions regarding my estate and to document wrongdoing I have discovered. I want to be very clear. I am 78 years old, but I am of completely sound mind. I have been examined by 3 independent psychiatrists who will attest to my mental competency. I have made these decisions freely, without coercion or undue influence from any party. He went on to detail everything. Every theft, every forged document, every lie. He showed copies of evidence on camera, explained how he had discovered each piece of fraud, and named every person involved. His voice remained steady throughout, but I could see the pain in his eyes. My daughter Eleanor has betrayed my trust in ways I never thought possible. She has stolen from me, lied to me, and manipulated me. She has conspired with her siblings and enlisted my grandson in these criminal activities. I have given her every chance to stop, to admit what she has done and make amends. She has only become more brazen. Therefore, I am making the decision to disinherit Eleanor and her co-conspirators completely. At the end of the video, Edwin looked directly into the camera, and it felt like he was looking at me. To my granddaughter Alex, if you are watching this, I am so very sorry for everything you have endured. I am sorry I did not protect you more effectively from their cruelty. I am sorry they kept you from me in my final days. But I want you to know that you are my true heir. Not because of blood, but because of character. You are honest, kind, hardworking, and selfless. You never asked me for anything. You built your own life. And you loved me for who I was, not for what I had. Use this inheritance wisely. Seek justice for what they have done. And most importantly, live a life that would make your mother proud. I love you, Alex. Never forget that. The video ended. I sat there with tears streaming down my face, and Davies quietly handed me a box of tissues. Take your time. I know this is overwhelming. I wiped my eyes and tried to compose myself. What happens tomorrow? How does this work? Davies closed the laptop carefully. Tomorrow, everyone will gather for the formal reading of the will. I will read the relevant portions aloud. Eleanor and the others will undoubtedly react with shock and anger. They will probably threaten to contest the will. That is when I will inform them of the evidence Edwin collected. I will play portions of the video and show them some of the documentation. My goal is to make them understand that contesting the will would be futile and would likely result in criminal prosecution. Do you think they will back down? I honestly do not know. Eleanor is entitled and greedy, but she is not stupid. When she sees the extent of evidence against her, she may realize she has no choice. Or, she may be so desperate that she tries to fight anyway. Either way, you need to be prepared for an ugly scene. Are you ready for that? I thought about everything I had been through. The years of subtle abuse, the condescension, the exclusion, watching helplessly as they isolated Edwin. The rage I had been suppressing for so long came to the surface, but it was cold and focused now. I am ready. I want justice. For Edwin, and for myself. Davies smiled approvingly. Good. Because your grandfather certainly wanted you to have it. We spent the next several hours going through every document, every piece of evidence, preparing for every possible argument Eleanor might make. Davies explained the legal process, what would happen if they contested, what the timeline would look like for estate transfer. He also warned me about the media attention this would likely generate. Billionaire disinherits daughter in favor of granddaughter, with accusations of fraud and elder abuse, is going to make headlines. You need to be ready for that. Should I hire a publicist or something? I have a good one on retainer who handles sensitive cases. I can make the introduction. For now, decline all interview requests and direct everything to my office. We will control the narrative as much as possible. By the time I left his office, it was nearly evening. My head was spinning with information, with strategy, with the weight of what was about to happen. I went home and tried to eat something, but my stomach was tied in knots. I called Maya instead. Can you come over? I need to tell you what is happening. She arrived within the hour with wine and Thai food, and I filled her in on everything. Her eyes got wider and wider as I talked. Holy shit, Alex. This is insane. Are you okay? Are you scared? I thought about it, terrified. But also, I do not know. Relieved? Edwin saw me. He valued me. He made sure I would be okay and that they would face consequences. It is more than I ever expected. Tomorrow is going to be brutal, though. Maya squeezed my hand. Whatever happens, I have got your back. Call me right after, okay? I need to know you are safe. The next day crawled by. I could barely focus at work, watching the clock inch toward 2 p.m. Finally, I told my boss I had a family emergency and needed to leave early. I changed into the suit I had brought, touched up my makeup, and drove to the estate. Several cars were already parked in the circular driveway. Eleanor's Mercedes, Charles's BMW, a car I assumed belonged to Carol and Greg, and Brandon's Audi that Edwin had bought him. I parked and sat for a moment, gathering my courage. I thought about my mother, about Edwin, about everyone who had believed in me. Then I got out of the car and walked to the front door. Maria answered, and her eyes widened when she saw me. Miss Alex, I am so glad you are here. She leaned in close and whispered. Be strong today. Mr. Vance loved you very much. We all know that. Thank you, Maria. That means more than you know. She squeezed my hand briefly before leading me to the library. The family was already assembled. Eleanor sat in Edwin's favorite chair again, her face composed but her eyes calculating. She wore a black designer dress and tasteful pearls. Charles sat on the sofa looking uncomfortable. Brandon stood by the window, arms crossed, his expression hostile. Carol and Greg sat in the corner whispering to each other. When I entered, the whispers stopped. Eleanor stood up with a tight smile. Alex, how kind of you to join us. I met her gaze steadily. I was invited. This is the formal reading of the will. Eleanor's smile tightened further. Yes, well, I am sure this will be brief. Davies is just going through the formalities. I assume Dad left you a small keepsake or maybe a minor trust fund. You should be grateful for that. Before I could respond, Robert Davies entered carrying his briefcase and several folders. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. I know this is a difficult time, but we have legal matters to address. Please, everyone sit down. We all found seats. I deliberately chose a chair slightly apart from the family group. I was here, but I was not one of them. Davies sat at the head of the table and opened his briefcase. This is the last will and testament of Edwin Charles Vance, executed on March 3rd of this year, 6 weeks before his death. This will supersedes all previous versions. It was witnessed by 3 independent parties and has been properly filed with the appropriate authorities. Eleanor leaned forward. March? He changed his will in March? Davies looked at her calmly. Yes, Mrs. Eleanor. Though I should note that the essential provisions of this will are consistent with changes he began making several years ago. Your father was very deliberate in his estate planning. Eleanor sat back, and I saw a flicker of unease cross her face. She glanced at Greg and Carol, and some silent communication passed between them. Davies continued. I will read the relevant portions. All personal effects and items of sentimental value will be distributed according to a separate list Edwin provided. However, the bulk of the estate, including all real property, financial assets, business holdings, and the trust fund, are bequeathed to his granddaughter, Alex, as the sole beneficiary. The silence was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop. Then Eleanor's face went white. That is impossible. Her voice was barely a whisper. Davies kept his expression neutral. I assure you, it is not only possible but entirely legal and binding. Eleanor shot to her feet, her composure shattering. No! This is insane! My father would never! He could not! Brandon stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. This is bullshit. What did you do? What lies did you fill his head with? He pointed at me accusingly. You manipulated a sick old man. Carol started crying loudly. This is not fair. What about us? What about family? Greg's face was turning an alarming shade of red. This is fraud. We will contest this. We will drag this through every court in the country. Charles remained seated, but he looked stunned. I watched the chaos unfold and I felt strangely calm. This was exactly what Edwin and Davies had prepared me for. Davies raised his hand for silence. If everyone could please sit down and compose yourselves. There is more you need to know. More? Eleanor's voice was shrill. What more could there possibly be? Davies opened one of his folders. Your father was very thorough. He anticipated that you might contest this will, and he wanted to make very clear why he made these decisions. He has provided extensive documentation of financial misconduct, fraud, and elder abuse that occurred over the past 5 years. The room went silent again, but this time, the quality of the silence was different. It was the silence of fear. Eleanor slowly sank back into her chair. "What are you talking about?" Davies began pulling out documents. Bank statements showing unauthorized wire transfers totaling nearly $4 million. Forged loan applications bearing your father's signature, which handwriting experts have confirmed were falsified. Recorded phone conversations where you, Mrs. Eleanor, along with Carol and Greg, discussed how to access more of Edwin's assets. Email exchanges where Brandon coordinated with financial institutions while misrepresenting his authority. And sworn affidavits from multiple household staff members documenting threats, intimidation, and suspicious instructions regarding your father's care and medication. Each accusation landed like a bomb. Eleanor's face cycled through shock, fear, and then rage. Brandon sank into a chair, all the bravado draining from him. Carol was sobbing openly. Greg looked like he wanted to run. "You are lying," Eleanor's voice shook. "You made this up. You are trying to steal from us." Davies shook his head. "Everything I have just described has been verified by independent auditors, forensic accountants, and legal experts. But perhaps you should hear from Edwin himself." He set up the laptop and projector, just as he had shown me yesterday. When Edwin's face appeared on the screen, Eleanor let out a choked sound. She watched, her hand covering her mouth, as her father methodically detailed every betrayal, every theft, every lie. When the video ended, she was shaking. That is not fair. He was sick. He was not thinking clearly. We were protecting him. Davies closed the laptop. "Your father was examined by 3 independent psychiatrists who will testify to his complete mental competence. The video I just showed you was recorded 6 months before his stroke. All of his decisions were made while he was in full possession of his faculties." Charles finally spoke, his voice heavy. "Eleanor, is this true? Did you really do all of this?" Eleanor spun toward him. "Do not you dare take their side. I did what I had to do for our family, for Brandon's future. Everything I did was to protect what was rightfully ours from outsiders." She glared at me with pure hatred. "That girl is not family. She is nothing. Her mother was not even Dad's real daughter. She has no right to any of this." I finally spoke, my voice steady and cold. "Grandfather thought I had every right. He chose me. Not because I manipulated him, not because I asked for anything, but because I loved him for who he was, because I never stole from him, because I never lied to him. Because I treated him with respect and dignity, even when you were drugging him into compliance and forging his signature." Eleanor lunged toward me, but Charles caught her arm. "You poisoned him against us." "You are nothing but a gold digger," Davies interrupted sharply. "Mrs. Eleanor, I strongly suggest you sit down and control yourself. Making threats or accusations will not help your situation. In fact, let me be very clear about what your situation is." He pulled out another document. "Based on the evidence Edwin collected, there is more than sufficient grounds to pursue criminal charges against you, Carol, Greg, and Brandon for fraud, forgery, theft, and possibly elder abuse. Edwin chose not to pursue those charges before his death, hoping you would stop. But he gave Alex the option to do so if she chooses. Additionally, if you contest this will, all of this evidence will be presented in court. It will become part of the public record. The media will have access to every detail of what you have done. Your reputations will be destroyed. You will likely face criminal prosecution. And you will still lose, because Edwin's will is ironclad and his mental competence is thoroughly documented." The fight went out of Eleanor. She seemed to deflate, all the rage and entitlement draining away to leave only fear. "What do you want?" "I want you to accept the will as written. I want you to cooperate with the estate transfer. And I want you to stay away from me. If you do that, I might decide not to pursue criminal charges." "Might. I am still deciding." Brandon found his voice, and it was small and broken. "What about me?" "What happens to me?" Davies answered. "The law school has been notified of your involvement. There will be an ethics investigation. Your legal career is most likely over. Whether you face criminal charges depends on what Alex decides and how cooperative you are going forward." I looked at Brandon, this cousin who had tormented me for years, who had looked down on me, who had helped his mother steal from the man who had paid for everything he had. He looked terrified and small. Maybe for the first time in his life, he was facing real consequences. "I am sorry," His voice cracked. "I know you do not believe me, but I am sorry." I did not understand how far we had gone until it was too late. I did not respond. His apology meant nothing. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Charles stood up slowly. "I need to say something." He looked at Eleanor, and his expression was harder than I had ever seen it. "I have been complicit in this through my silence. I knew things were not right. I knew you were taking money, Eleanor. I told myself it was not my business, that you would stop, that confronting you would just cause family drama. But I was wrong. I was a coward." He turned to me. "Alex, I am so sorry. For everything. For not standing up for you, for not protecting Edwin, for letting this happen, and I want you to know that I have filed for divorce. I cannot be married to someone who would do this." Eleanor's eyes went wide. "Charles, you cannot be serious. We can fix this. We can work through this." He shook his head. "No, Eleanor. We cannot. I have already moved out. My lawyer will be in touch. And Alex, I have my own evidence of Eleanor's financial misconduct, including money she stole from our joint accounts and assets she tried to hide from me. I will be providing that to your attorney if you need it. Thank you, Uncle Charles. That means a great deal." Davies stood up. "Unless anyone has any further questions, this meeting is concluded. Mrs. Eleanor, I will need your signature on several documents acknowledging that you understand the terms of the will and agree not to contest it. If you refuse, we will proceed with legal action immediately. Do you understand?" Eleanor looked at him with dead eyes and nodded. She was beaten and she knew it. "Good. I will have the documents prepared within the week. Alex, could you stay for a moment? There are a few more items we need to discuss." The others filed out slowly. Eleanor did not look at me. Brandon paused at the door, opening his mouth as if to say something else, then thought better of it and left. Carol and Greg practically ran out. Charles gave me a nod of support before leaving. When the room was finally empty, except for Davies and me, I let out a long breath I had not realized I was holding. "You did very well," Davies smiled. "That was not easy, facing them like that. I felt like I was going to throw up the entire time. But it is over now, right? They will sign the documents?" "I believe so. Eleanor is many things, but she is not stupid. She knows she has no leverage. The will is solid. The evidence against her is overwhelming. Fighting would only make things worse for her. What about criminal charges? Do you really think I should pursue them?" "That is entirely up to you, Alex. Edwin left that decision in your hands. Personally, I think the threat of prosecution will be enough to keep them in line. They will be dealing with enough consequences as it is. Eleanor will lose her social standing once word gets out. Brandon's career is over. They will all face financial ruin from paying back what they stole plus legal fees if they try to fight. But if you want justice in the form of criminal prosecution, we have the evidence to support it." I thought about it. Part of me wanted to see them behind bars, but another part of me just wanted them out of my life completely. "Let me think about it. For now, as long as they cooperate, I will not file charges. But if any of them comes after me or tries to cause trouble, all bets are off." "Fair enough." Davies made a note. "Now, let us talk about next steps for the estate. There is a lot to manage, and I want to make sure you have the support you need. We are going to need to appoint a management team for the various businesses. We will need to transfer accounts and titles. And frankly, you might want to consider going back to school to get your MBA, or at least working closely with the advisors Edwin had in place. This is a significant responsibility. I understand. I am ready to learn. I want to honor what grandfather built." Over the next several weeks, the transfer of the estate proceeded smoothly. Eleanor signed all the necessary documents without argument. Charles's divorce moved forward quickly. The law school suspended Brandon pending their investigation. Carol and Greg largely disappeared, probably hoping to avoid attention. True to his word, Charles provided his own evidence of Eleanor's financial crimes, strengthening the case if I ever needed it. The media did get wind of the story, as Davies had predicted. Billionaire disinherits daughter after fraud discovered. Granddaughter inherits massive fortune. The articles painted Eleanor in a very unfavorable light, and painted me as the sympathetic figure who had been shut out of my grandfather's final days. Davies managed all the press inquiries, declining interview requests but providing carefully worded statements about Edwin's wishes being honored and justice being served. My own life became surreal almost overnight. I was suddenly responsible for managing a $37 million estate plus the various business holdings that generated income. I hired the best financial advisors, accountants, and lawyers I could find. I enrolled in business courses online. I met with Edwin's former business partners and executives, learning everything I could about the companies he had built. It was overwhelming and exhausting, but it was also deeply fulfilling. I was carrying on his legacy. I was proving that his faith in me was justified. I also started making plans for the Edwin Vance Foundation for Family Justice. It would provide legal aid, counseling, and financial support to young people dealing with family abuse, manipulation, and exploitation. It would fund research into elder abuse prevention. It would be Edwin's legacy and mine together, something good rising from all the pain and betrayal. A few months after everything was settled, I received an unexpected letter. It was from Brandon. The handwriting was messy, like he had written it quickly or emotionally. "Alex, I do not expect you to respond to this. I do not deserve your forgiveness or your attention. But I needed to write this anyway. I have spent the past few months in therapy, trying to understand how I became someone who could hurt people the way I did, how I could participate in stealing from my own grandfather, how I could treat you with such cruelty." The answer is not simple, but a lot of it comes down to entitlement. I was raised to believe that certain things were owed to me because of my last name. I was raised by a mother who valued money and status above integrity and kindness. I was never taught to see people for who they are, only for what they could do for me. That is not an excuse. It is just an explanation. I destroyed my own future through my choices. Law school is gone. Most of my friends have disappeared. My father barely speaks to me. My mother blames me for not protecting her better, even though I was just following her lead. I am working as a paralegal now, making barely enough to cover rent and student loans, and I deserve all of it. You were right about everything. Grandpa loved you because you never wanted anything from him except his company and his love. That is something I never understood until it was too late. You treated him with dignity and respect. You built your own life instead of waiting for handouts. You earned everything you received, even before the inheritance. I just want you to know that I am truly sorry. I am sorry for every cruel word, every dismissive comment, every time I made you feel like you did not belong. You did belong. You were the only one who really did. I hope you are happy, Alex. I hope you use that inheritance to do amazing things. And I hope someday you can think of me without hatred, even if forgiveness is too much to ask. Brandon. I read the letter several times, trying to decide how I felt about it. Was he genuinely remorseful, or was he just feeling sorry for himself now that he had lost everything? Did his apology change anything? In the end, I decided it did not really matter. Whether his remorse was genuine or not, he was facing consequences. His life had fundamentally changed. The person he used to be, arrogant and entitled and cruel, could not survive in his new reality. Maybe he would become someone better. Maybe he would not. But that was not my problem to solve. I put the letter in a drawer and moved on. I never responded, but I did not throw it away either. Maybe someday I would be ready to engage with it. Or maybe not. And that was okay. I also heard through Charles that Eleanor had largely become a recluse. Her social circle had evaporated once the details of the fraud became public. She was living in a modest apartment, working a regular job for the first time in decades, trying to rebuild some semblance of a life. Charles said she looked years older, worn down by the weight of her own choices. Part of me felt satisfaction at that. Another part of me just felt sad. She had destroyed her own life because of greed and entitlement. She had lost her father, her husband, her son's respect, her social standing, everything. And for what? Money she had stolen and then lost anyway? As for me, I was learning to navigate my new reality. I had moved into the mansion, though I had completely redecorated several rooms to make them feel like mine. I had kept Edwin's study exactly as it was, turning it into a sort of memorial space where I could go when I needed to feel close to him. I had hired a small, trustworthy staff who treated me with respect. And slowly, carefully, I was building a life that felt authentic and meaningful. I was dating someone I met through my business classes, a kind man named David who knew about my inheritance but was more interested in my ideas about social entrepreneurship than my bank account. I had reconnected with old friends and made new ones who valued me for who I was. I was learning to trust again, to let people in, to believe that not everyone was trying to use me. The hardest part was forgiving myself. I spent a lot of time in therapy, working through the guilt I felt for not protecting Edwin better, for not seeing the signs sooner, for all the years I had let them make me feel small. My therapist kept reminding me that I had been a victim too, that I had done the best I could with the information and power I had at the time. It took a long time to truly believe that. 1 year after Edwin's death, I held the first annual gala for the Edwin Vance Foundation for Family Justice. We raised over $2 million that night. We announced partnerships with legal aid organizations, therapy clinics, and research institutions. We shared stories of young people who had been helped by our programs, who had escaped abusive family situations and rebuilt their lives. Standing at that podium, looking out at the crowd of supporters and donors and advocates, I felt Edwin's presence. I felt my mother's presence. I felt like I was finally living the life they had both wanted for me, a life of purpose and dignity and authentic connection. A life where I used my resources and privilege to help others who were fighting battles similar to mine. A life where I refused to let bitterness and anger define me, choosing instead to build something beautiful from the ashes of betrayal. After the gala, Charles approached me. He had been one of our biggest donors and had helped spread the word about the foundation. He looked healthier than he had in years, lighter somehow. This would have made Edwin so proud. You are honoring his memory in the best possible way. Thank you, Uncle Charles, for everything, for standing up when it mattered, for supporting the foundation, for being someone I can trust. He smiled sadly. It was the least I could do. I have spent a lot of time thinking about my failures as a husband and a father and a human being. I cannot change the past, but I can try to do better going forward. Your foundation gives me a way to do that. How is Brandon doing? I had not asked about him in months. Charles sighed. He is struggling, but he is trying. He is still in therapy. He is working hard at his paralegal job. He asks about you sometimes, but I tell him you need space. Is that right? That is right. Maybe someday I will be ready to have a conversation with him. But not yet. I understand. Take all the time you need. You do not owe him anything. Now, as I sit here almost 2 years after Edwin's death, I can finally say I am at peace. I live in the home he left me. I manage the businesses he built. I run the foundation that honors his values. I have created a life that is mine, built on a foundation of love and justice rather than manipulation and greed. Do I still sometimes feel angry about what Eleanor and the others did? Yes. Do I sometimes wish I had pursued criminal charges just to see them punished more severely? Yes. But mostly, I feel grateful. Grateful for the time I had with Edwin. Grateful for the validation he gave me. Grateful for the opportunity to turn pain into purpose. Grateful for the chance to help others who are fighting similar battles. And I have learned so much about family, about worth, about justice. I learned that family is defined by love and respect, not by blood or obligation. I learned that my value is inherent, not dependent on how others treat me. I learned that standing up for yourself is not selfish but necessary. I learned that justice sometimes comes, even when you least expect it. I learned that healing is possible, even from the deepest wounds. I learned that using your power and privilege to help others is the highest form of success. Most importantly, I learned that it is never too late to reclaim your life, to set boundaries, to choose yourself, to demand the respect you deserve. My grandfather used to say that character is revealed in crisis. He was right. The crisis revealed exactly who everyone was. Eleanor, Brandon, Carol, and Greg showed their greed and willingness to hurt others for personal gain. Charles showed his capacity for growth and redemption. Davies showed his integrity and loyalty. My real friends showed their support and love. And I showed my strength, my resilience, my capacity to fight for justice, while maintaining my own integrity. I could have given up. I could have walked away from the fight. I could have let them win. But I did not. I stood my ground. I demanded justice. I honored Edwin's wishes. And I won. Not just the money. Not just the estate. I won my self-respect. I won my peace. I won my future. And that is worth more than any inheritance could ever be. So here is what I want you to take away from my story. If you are in a toxic relationship, whether it is with family, a partner, or friends, know that you deserve better. You deserve respect. You deserve love. You deserve to be valued for who you are, not for what you can provide. And if people cannot give you that, it is okay to walk away. It is okay to set boundaries. It is okay to choose yourself. It is not selfish. It is survival. It is self-love. It is the beginning of real life. And if you have someone in your life like my grandfather, someone who sees you and values you and believes in you, hold on to them. Tell them how much they mean to you. Let them know their support matters. because those people are rare and precious, and they can change your entire life. This is not a story about revenge. This is not even really a story about inheritance. This is a story about finding your worth in a world that tries to diminish you. It is about standing up when everything in you wants to stay silent. It is about justice, yes, but more than that, it is about healing. It is about taking back your power. It is about refusing to be small, and it is about building a life that is truly yours. I am Alex Vance. I am 24 years old. I am a billionaire heiress, yes, but more importantly, I am someone who learned to value herself. I am someone who chose justice over approval. I am someone who survived, and I am someone who is finally, truly, starting to live. If you have ever been made to feel like you do not matter, I am here to tell you that you do. You matter. Your feelings matter. Your boundaries matter. Your future matters. Do not let anyone convince you otherwise. Stand up. Speak out. Choose yourself. Because you deserve nothing less than a life where you are valued, respected, and loved for exactly who you are. So I want to ask you, what would you do if you were in my position? Would you have fought back, or would you have walked away quietly? Have you ever been in a situation where standing up for yourself cost you relationships? How did you find the strength to move forward? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I would love to hear your stories. And if this story resonated with you, if it gave you hope or made you think, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about resilience, justice, and finding your power. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, because we all deserve to know that we are not alone, that our struggles matter, and that there is always hope for a better tomorrow. Thank you for listening to my story. Now go out there and write your own.